That man is having a serious conversation, man.
I mean, Punk actually looks pretty nervous right now. I'm not gonna lie.
What's up, Beans, and welcome back to Ctrl-Alt-Fight, the ideal place to catch up on a whole week's news. And since we had Evo Japan this week, there is predictably a lot to talk about. We have 2 new characters for Tekken 8, 2 new characters for KOF 15, rollback netcode comes to KOF 13, an online beta for Grand Blue Fantasy vs Rising, CLG Gaming suffers mass layoffs, Street Fighter gets a new movie deal, a 14-year-old makes top 8, Punk throws a bottle, Evo apologizes to Punk for making him throw that bottle, and today's top story, Capcom just banned every all-button controller that doesn't change its firmware for the 2023 Pro Tour. There's way too much to talk about, so let's begin with the 2 new trailers for Tekken 8. First up, we have a returning character, Leroy Smith, whose first appearance was in Tekken 7. The character is known as the Grand Master of Drip, and you can see why from his clothing to the way he moves. Producer Harada even dropped a little joke in during the reveal that Leroy was notorious for being so strong that his dominance at a previous Evo Japan led the event to jokingly being known as Leroy Japan. After some news about the next Tekken World Tour, we got a second trailer, this time for Asuka Kazama. Despite the Kazama name, it seems that Asuka and Jin Kazama are not siblings and possibly not even cousins. While the lore might not be completely clear yet, her backstory reads like the plot to Shenmue. Father runs a martial arts dojo but gets attacked by a mysterious man from China, so they go searching for them and end up in a bunch of street fights. Well, none of that matters because all you really remember about Asuka is that she's the maniac who rode her bike off a tall skyscraper. Speaking of high places, 14-year-old Poka reached the highest level you can get to in Guilty Gear Strive by placing top 8 at Evo Japan this weekend. And in winner's bracket, no less, which means that until finals day, Poka went undefeated. While placing top 8 is impressive, we all became big fans when Poka showed up in his school uniform and defiantly stated that today, he's come to continue beating up old men. With trash talk like that, I think we can safely say that the next generation of fighting gamers are gonna be just fine. But now for a top 8 story that didn't go so well at Evo Japan. Finals day for Street Fighter V was interrupted by an almost 40-minute wait as staff tried desperately to find the cause of display lag, which Punk had reported after the first game of his set versus Momochi. What started off as a simple complaint about the setup slowly became more and more serious as Punk's mood worsened, and Evo Japan's tournament organizers started showing up on the scene. See, Evo Japan isn't just any tournament, it's the biggest fighting game tournament in Japan, and technically an Evo event just like the original Evo held in Vegas each year. As of 2021, Evo is co-owned by Sony, which is likely the reason why the tournaments continue to be played on PlayStations and now on Sony's new InZone branded gaming monitors. That's right, complaining about display lag led to a 40-minute interruption during finals of the most entered game of the whole tournament, which was being played on a game console and monitor and headset, which were all made by the company that owns and funds the event. Perhaps you can see now why the producers of the event were more than a little bit stressed out. The match did eventually resume, but by the end of it, Punk was obviously not happy, as you can see here from this bottle, which he allegedly threw in anger according to this tweet here. There's no video footage, but it does appear to be the same bottle. There's a lot more to unpack here, but as I stated on Twitter, Punk isn't really the person to be mad at here. He may be the one who raised the display lag issue, but it's not his responsibility to ensure that the tournament continues on schedule or to make the Evo sponsors look good. Those are all the tasks of the tournament organizer and can be enforced through proper rules that ensure that lag checks happen at the appropriate time and with the right measuring tools to prevent the whole situation from becoming a simple difference of opinion. The following day, Evo even publicly apologized to Punk and the many other players who'd voiced similar complaints over the weekend.
Fly through the room in a slow motion zoom like there is no spoon. You've changed your tune, now you see it's a boon. There's a brand new game that has birthed from the womb. So watch as the moon creates a wave and a flood. It's time to prepare yourself for some melty blood.
While sure, it's in Punk's best interest to act in a way that attracts him a new sponsor, standing up for higher standards and proper setups that don't suffer from lag is something he'll take abuse for today in exchange for better setups for us all at tournaments in the future. There's no need to sit around waiting for the future though, because the future is now, as SNK dropped a ton of announcements during Evo weekend. Kim Kaf-1 is now playable in KOF 15 as of April 4th, Sylvie Pola Pola, a character introduced in KOF 14 and clearly inspired by Caddy Pamu Pamu, is returning to the roster this summer. Boss character Gonitz was also announced and will be playable this summer. Crossplay will soon be playable in an open beta for KOF 15 this spring. The successor to Fatal Fury / Garo Mark of the Wolves is now furiously in development. Rollback netcode in Samurai Showdown will get its proper release also this spring. And finally, SNK's 2D masterpiece KOF 13 will be re-released for PS4 and Switch as KOF 13 Global Match. SNK has used the Global Match subtitle before, like when KOF 97 was re-released with online multiplayer. KOF 13 already had online multiplayer, but this time it's getting Rollback netcode, which should breathe new life into the game and significantly increase the number of players you can realistically get matches with. I can't wait to see another influx of YouTube thumbnails where players declare the combo trials to be impossible. Not impossible, hopefully, is AI coaching in Street Fighter 6, which brings us nicely onto OMG, a hit tweet. At 3,000 likes and 280,000 page views, JP shows us a preview of a prototype that will supposedly take advantage of AI to get stats from your replay videos and identify areas you could have played better. The video shows how the app could be used to count things like knockdowns, counter hits, and missed anti-airs. I've actually spoken about this sort of feature on livestream before, but I really hope we get an official implementation built into fighting games from the start. This video preview shows how it would work in theory, but how accurate it will be in practice remains to be seen, especially as it's designed to analyze video footage and doesn't appear to be pulling from actual data processed by the game itself. Definitely a tool to keep an eye on, as stuff like this could make a huge difference to new or casual players who don't have a local community to support their progress. But now it's time for our top story. Capcom banning almost everyone who uses a leverless controller. Quite literally the day before Evo Japan started, Capcom posted a tweet stating that Capcom has made the decision to update the Capcom Pro Tour rules in relation to leverless controllers. This was done to address consistency and fairness concerns. As for what that update was exactly, the Pro Tour website states, if up and down directions are input at the same time, both inputs must be maintained or both inputs must be rejected. Now, if you're not up to speed on leverless controllers, here's the lowdown. Instead of a traditional arcade stick, many players now use controllers that use 4 separated buttons in place of a lever. This makes circular motions like Ryu's Hadoken or Zangief's spinning pile driver less intuitive, but in exchange you get greater accuracy in general because you can input commands using buttons instead of a lever, which can sometimes overshoot or not fully actuate the position required to complete a technical input. It goes far deeper, so I'll link some videos below that explain it if you're interested. But what you really need to know is that these all-button controllers introduced a new problem that fighting games weren't prepared for 10 years ago, and that's simultaneous opposing cardinal directions, or SOCD for short. That's just a fancy way of saying you can now press left and right or up and down at the same time. But can you imagine what would happen if Guile could hold back to charge a move, press forward to release a sonic boom, and never have to stop holding back to charge for the next one? Well, leverless controllers take this into account with what's known as SOCD cleaning, which is built into the controller. Pressing left and right causes them to cancel each other and output neutral, but for some reason pressing up and down causes them to output up. This means charge characters can flash kick immediately without spending even the 30 milliseconds or so it would take to shift an arcade lever to the up position to do the same move, and then another 30 milliseconds to shift it back to charge. We're going into a little too much detail, but essentially when the new rule goes into effect, current controllers will have to be updated on the firmware side to comply if they want to be tournament legal. For most leverless players, this won't make a lot of difference apart from having to relearn some muscle memory and losing out on various input shortcuts that will no longer work. What's really strange, however, about this all is that Capcom specifically said they're doing this in the name of fairness, but in fact the new rule will actually revive the most notorious shortcut of them all, fast DPs. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but for Street Fighter 6 they removed the main DP shortcut, which allowed 3 button presses to input a dragon punch with no need to release any fingers. Inputs that involve lifting fingers take quite a bit longer and are harder to do since the human hand is much weaker at lifting than it is at pressing and gripping. In Street Fighter 5, the shortcut was forward, down forward, up forward, or 639, and it's not actually present in Street Fighter 6. Instead, you have to do the full traditional input or forward, down, forward, forward, or 636, which involves lifting a finger. Not impossible, just not as fast and easy. Well, Capcom's new rule, which aims to remove even more shortcuts from all-button controllers, has inadvertently brought the old, most notorious one back to life. Since up and down now equals neutral, pressing the same 3 buttons as before in Street Fighter V to output a 639 command will now effectively output 636, since the up and down buttons cancel each other out. Whoops. It all sounds kind of messy, but actually this is what I enjoy the most about the fighting game scene. Everything is constantly changing, sometimes for the better, and sometimes for the worse. But either way, it's exciting, and someday in the future, we'll look back on these days like they were the Wild West, when people were winning hundreds of thousands of dollars in tournaments, with controllers that were potentially cheating, but potentially the future, but also potentially could have been banned at one point. I, for one, am really glad to be part of the scene as it is today. There's way too much to cover from this past week, so I'm just going to rush down the rest of the news. Korea unveiled its Street Fighter 6 edition of the Fighting Stick Alpha. Unlike the Guilty Gear Strive edition, this one is actually painted differently and not just a printed inlay. Grand Blue Fantasy Vs. Rising, the follow-up to 2020's Grand Blue Fantasy Vs, will have an online beta test in May. Rollback netcode is one of the big new features in Rising, so I expect that the online beta test will include it, but then again, games with Rollback have done beta tests with delay netcode before, so there's no guarantee. At Evo Japan, the winner of Guilty Gear Strive, Gobol, was presented a beautiful Leverless Victrix FS12 with an even more beautiful Street Fighter V logo that was laser engraved permanently into it. CLG Gaming has been sold, and with it the careers of many sponsored pro gamers, some of them fighting gamers, are up in the air. Another attempt at a Street Fighter movie is on its way. Video game spin-offs have such a history of being terrible that it seems unlikely that this one will be any different. But the web show Assassin's Fist was actually pretty good in my opinion, and moreover, as long as we get another video game called Street Fighter, the game of the movie of the game, I think we can call that a success. Listen up, that's all for this week. Evo Japan was super fun and I took a ton of video footage, so look out for a new video on that sometime in the near future. Comment if you liked this video, subscribe if you want to see more, and check out this next video if you just can't get enough fighting game goodness. That's all I've got time for today. I'll see you in the next episode of Ctrl-Alt-Fight.